So you want to make peace with food and you want to do it in a way that feels both practical and sustainable. If so, you're in the right place. Today we're going to talk about 5 steps to making peace with food. So step number 1, without judgment, I want you to make a list of the foods that you consider bad, okay? So likely if you have anxiety around food, if you don't trust yourself around certain foods, if you feel out of control around certain foods, it is highly likely that you've attached food labels. It's highly likely that you consider some foods good and some foods bad. Okay, so I want you to apply self-honesty here, and I want you to practice non-judgment as you begin to make this list. Okay, so towards the top of the list, I want you to place the foods that give you the least amount of anxiety when you think of eating them, okay? And then towards the bottom of the list, I want you to place the foods that would give you the most amount of anxiety when you think of eating them. Step number 2, you're gonna choose one of the foods on the list that you've created, okay? So if this is your first time doing this practice, I highly suggest you choose one of the foods that will give you the least amount of anxiety when you eat it, okay? But go ahead and choose one of the foods on this list and be mindful as you choose. And then you're gonna go to the store and you're going to buy this food, and you're gonna buy multiple servings of this food. The reason you want multiple servings is because as you begin to eat this food and make peace with this food, if you then decide, I don't feel truly satisfied yet, I would like to have more of this food, you wanna make sure that that food is available to you. So step number 3, you're going to be very intentional about deciding where and when to make peace with this food, okay? So a few really important things to consider when you're making this decision is, first of all, making sure that you limit distractions. So it's not possible to be completely distraction free. Well, maybe some people in some situations can be. That's not always realistic for my life. But we want to limit as many distractions as possible. So if your house tends to be loud at certain times of the day, that wouldn't be the best time to do this practice, okay? You also want to make sure that you're putting away your phone, you're putting away your computer, you're putting away things that are going to distract you. And making sure you clear a space, right? So you can really take time with this practice. A couple other considerations. We want to make sure that we're not overly hungry when we do this practice, okay? So moderately hungry can actually be really wonderful, because when we're moderately hungry, food tastes really good, and we can have an even more satisfying experience. But when we are overly hungry, something called biological hunger kicks in. And when biological hunger kicks in, we tend to get that out of control feeling. So be really mindful that you're not overly hungry during this practice. And the last thing I want you to consider is how tired you are, okay? So if you're feeling tired, it may not be the best time to do this practice. You wanna make sure that you're not tired, okay? So just kind of check in with yourself to decide, okay, am I actually feeling a little bit tired? And if that's the case, maybe save this practice for the following day when you're more rested, okay? So all of these things do impact our ability to tune into our food, our eating experience, and to check in with our body without judgment. So you wanna set yourself up for success by really taking into consideration the time and location of this practice. Step number 4, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna mindfully eat the food that you've selected. Okay, so if you do not have a mindful eating practice, if you're unsure of how to practice mindful eating, definitely send me a message. I will share the best way to contact me at the end of this video, but definitely send me a message, because I've created a free mindful eating guide that I'd love to get into your hands. So, but anyways, yeah, so this step number 4, it's all about sitting down and eating mindfully, really using our senses to tune into our food and our eating experience. Lastly, we have step number 5, and step number 5 is simply continuing this practice until the food becomes emotionally neutral. So what does it mean for food to be emotionally neutral? It simply means the food no longer holds any power over you, all right? So really what happens is when we attach food labels, right, like good or bad, we're essentially placing food on a pedestal. All right, and when we place that food on a pedestal, it begins to hold power over us. And this is what causes those feelings of anxiety, distress. It's what causes that feeling of not being able to control ourselves around food. And so what happens is when we began to do this practice of making peace with food, making food emotionally neutral, we are essentially taking the food off the pedestal. And then what happens? The food no longer holds any power over us. Eating becomes easy, exactly how it was created to be. So this is how my client Julie made peace with chips. She used to binge on chips at night. She felt very out of control around chips. She even told me that that was a food she didn't believe she could make peace with. But now Julie has a completely peaceful relationship with chips. She can keep them in her house. She doesn't binge on them. Her cravings for chips has drastically decreased. And she just has a very peaceful relationship with chips and many other foods as well. It's also how going through these steps I just shared with you is also how my client Beck made peace with chocolate. She used to binge on chocolate. She felt out of control around chocolate. And since she went through this process of making peace with chocolate, she now has chocolate in her desk drawer. But interestingly enough, she rarely eats it. She just doesn't have the same cravings that she used to have for chocolate. She likes it still, but she tells me it's just not something she wants all the time because she's truly made peace with it. So these are just a couple of the examples, but yeah, I've had many clients with many different foods make peace just by going through this process that I've just shared with you. So definitely take the time to invest in this practice, okay? So knowledge, you can have all the knowledge in the world, right? You can continue to consume that knowledge and take that knowledge in, but the truth is knowledge without action is useless. All right. And I don't say that to be mean. This is something I wish someone had told me. So what I want you to do, my challenge to you is to actually apply what I've just taught. You can go back to the beginning of this video, rewatch it, and take your time, right, with the video and then apply it. Go and apply it to your life. Buy the food. Make sure you have multiple servings. Create the space, be intentional about the space, sit down, eat the food mindfully, right? Check in with your food, check in with your senses, check in with your body without judgment, okay? So take the time to do this practice. So if you have any questions at all, or maybe you just enjoyed this content and you want to see more similar content, you can find me on Instagram at Eileen Mitchell Wellness. You can send me a message there, or you can find me at eileenmitchellwellness.com. I've also created a podcast called The Peaceful Plate. You can find that on both Apple or Spotify. So definitely take the time, invest in this practice, and feel free to get a hold of me if you have any questions at all.